Sunday Surefire Podcast. I'm your host, the commish. Joining me tonight is the co-host, Ethan Weaver.
Kamish, how we doing?
We are doing pretty well, Ethan. Doing pretty well, man. We are in full swing around here, talking 2025 Dynasty rookie class. Last week we hit on quarterbacks. Make sure you're going back and checking out that episode if you missed it. And this week we're jumping right over to the tight end position. So a lot of talking about this year's running back class and some guys in the receiver group too. We'll get to those guys down the road here to make sure you're not missing any of our content here, folks. Make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button on all of our videos, and we'll make sure we keep you right up to date with the rookie class. And so when your drafts come this spring, you're gonna be ready to crush those, ready to dominate because you already have our intel stashed away in your brains. But yeah, like I said, tonight's a tight end heavy episode. We're gonna be running down five guys that are, we'll say, close to the consensus at this point as the top guys. There's certainly a case to be made for some others beyond the top couple players here. They should be in the top five, and we'll get to those guys down the road too. Here, we're early in the offseason, recording this in mid-February, so this is more of a quick hitting episode on some of the high-profile names in this 2025 tight end class. And we'd be remiss if we didn't start the episode with the guy who's probably the consensus number one guy at this position this year. That's going to be Tyler Warren out of Penn State, Ethan. So why don't you get us started on talking about Warren and why he's going to be a great prospect for NFL teams?
Yeah, Tyler Warren, he had a great 2024 season. The probably the consensus tight end one right now in the dynasty space and in the NFL draft. I mean, some people project him as a top 10 pick. So definitely a first round talent. Tyler Warren, Penn State senior, 6'6", 257 pounds is what I have seen him listed on NFL.com. He's going to be turning 23 in May of this year. And like I said, had a really, really productive 2024 season, 104 catches, 1,233 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He was heavily utilized in this offense. I mean, they just put him everywhere. He was kind of a Swiss Army knife. So I like to see that, especially from the tight end position, because tight ends and fantasy production, I mean, athleticism matters. And to me, you need to be a good athlete to be a Swiss Army knife. And the fact that they're lining him up at quarterback, in the backfield, in line, slot, out wide. I mean, just looking at his overall snaps, I mean, he took 39 snaps on offense at quarterback. He had 69 in the backfield. In line, 414, 293 in the slot, and he was out wide 93 times. So just a very versatile player. And Penn State loved to get him the ball in space in his hands quickly, and they just watched him do work when he did get that ball. Like I said, just very, very, very productive. I mean, athletic, very sure-handed, and he's like quick in space. He has a very, very good route tree. And he's very, very big. I'm hoping he participates in the NFL Combine to see his athleticism. I know people are like, oh, this guy could maybe have a Brock Bowers, uh, maybe NFL season this year. I mean, obviously not tight end one, but like a guy that's coming in the league with very, very high expectations, top 10 NFL draft pick. I don't think he's anywhere near Brock Bowers. I mean, Brock Bowers, he as a freshman, he came in the SEC and obviously dominated. Whereas Tyler Warren, it took him some time at Penn State to really kind of take off. His junior season was his first season where he actually kind of had some production. He had 34 catches, 422 yards. But before that, he had 5 and 10 receptions as a freshman and sophomore. So he didn't really come on really a big time until his senior year, unlike my guy, Brock Bowers. But I do think Tyler Warren is going to be very productive and going to be a year one starter in the NFL, which is obviously great for fantasy football. PFF had a pretty cool article on tight end production and how the final year of these players' college statistics correlated to NFL success. So in this article, there were 34 tight ends who had at least 600 yards receiving in the last 7 seasons in the NFL, and they took all 34 of those players and they took their final season of college stats and they tracked their PFF receiving grade, the yards after catch per reception, and the yards per route run. Of the 34, there were some that couldn't be tracked because they were PFF wasn't tracking statistics during their final year. So it ended up being a total of 25 tight ends. And what they averaged in those three categories, the average PFF receiving grade was 79.3. The average yards after the catch per reception was 5.96, and yards per route run was 2.12. So all these NFL tight ends that had at least 600 yards in the past 7 years take their final year of college statistics, well, in these three metrics, and these are the averages that they came up with. And Tyler Warren, he surpassed all of these averages. And I mean, he had a PFF grade of 93.1, yards after catch per reception of 7.0, and then yards per route run of 2.91. So you're correlating guys that have obviously done it in the NFL, 600 plus receiving yards in the past 7 years, and you're correlating their final year of college production. And Warren is far and above a lot of these averages. So I think Tyler Warren is going to be a locked and loaded year one starter, and I think he has a chance to burst onto the fantasy scene.
Yeah, I mean, all signs are pointing to Warren being an excellent fantasy contributor. Like you said, the NFL is going to think very highly of him. I know you like to reference Daniel Jeremiah's mock drafts. His most recent one had him going number 7 overall to the Jets, which would be incredible draft capital for a tight end. Just absolutely what we want to see. And I don't have a ton more to add on Warren. I think at this point in the process, he's pretty steadily going to be the consensus number one in the process. And as we go along here, folks, like I said, we're recording this in mid-February. Just know that we reserve the right to kind of change our rankings around as more information becomes available in the process through the combine, certainly through the NFL draft when we see where these players land and the type of capital that gets invested in them for sure. Things can change, but Tyler Warren, at this moment in time, maybe this is hot take-ish, maybe it's not. He's actually not my number one tight end. As much as I love him, he's my number 2 tight end. He's really good. I do want shares for sure. But I'm going to go with Colston Loveland out of Michigan as my number 1 tight end at this point in the process in the offseason. Like I said, out of Michigan, 6'5", 245 pounds. Just a natural receiving talent out there. He's just smooth in his routes. He's a joy to watch on film. Not a lot of wasted motion out there. He has a full route tree at his disposal as well. And I think Michigan knew that. I mean, they lined him up either out wide or in a slot position on 48% of his snaps in 2024, essentially using him as a wide receiver. In terms of blocking, I think he can do it well enough to be out there, but I don't think he's never really going to be an elite blocker, which I actually view as a strength. I know we want all of our players to be well-rounded and all that, but let's face it, guys, you don't get points for blocking in your leagues. We want our guy out there catching the football. So the fact that he can do it well enough to be on the field in most situations means he can be out there, but he's also going to be the guy catching the ball in those situations. And he gave us 2 productive college seasons at a young age. He's just 21 years old as a rookie this upcoming season, which is great. You broke the all-time single season record for receptions from a Michigan tight end this year with 56. Pro Football Focus loved him too, graded him number 5 overall among tight ends. And he did all this, guys, with horrendous quarterback play, okay? Davis Warren was the primary trigger man for the Wolverines this season. And let's just say he's not going to get confused with J.J. McCarthy anytime soon. I mean, the guy threw for just under 1,200 yards. Again, the starting quarterback threw for under 1,200 yards. 7 touchdowns and 9 picks. Awful, awful, awful. And if you,
Good
you just
numbers.
drive that point home a little bit further, use Pro Football Focus's 145th graded quarterback. Just terrible. Terrible play overall. And so Loveland was able to succeed despite the limitations of the guy throwing him the football. Okay. And look, I mean, is he a perfect prospect? No. I mean, he's not going to be confused with Rob Gronkowski in the blocking game out there. We know that. He's not going to be taking on defensive ends, which is fine because we don't get points for that, like I said. And he could be a little bit better after the catch, too. He's pretty fluid in getting open. Could stand to improve there a little bit as well. Did struggle with drops early on in his career, too. He had 7 drops on 89 targets through his first 2 seasons at UM. So clean that up a little bit as this time went on there. But we know in fantasy, drops don't really kill you too much until you start affecting your playing time. So something to monitor, but not the biggest red flag in the world. So either give me your thoughts on Loveland before we kind of talk about his outlook, or maybe just get into where you think he might get drafted in the NFL come April.
I like Levin. I think he's going to be a fantasy producer for us. I think he's going to go potentially in the top 20 picks. I know there's some who have him mocked in the top 15, top 16. So I do definitely think he's a locked and loaded first round selection. He Yeah, as you said, he was ranked very high in the PFF grade, 90.6. I alluded to some of those statistics when I was talking about Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren beat him in all three of those statistics, but I mean, Loveland was pretty good. He was over those averages like I was talking about in PFF grade and yards per route run. His yards per route run were 2.67, but his yards after catch per reception was 5.2, which was a little under those averages I was talking about before. But Loveland, obviously, a really good prospect, very fluid as a route runner. Um, can run pretty much the entire route tree. But as you alluded to with the quarterback play, it was horrendous. I mean, he had 582 yards this year, which doesn't seem like a ton, but considering the second leading receiver had 248 yards, I mean, and like you said, the quarterback only threw for like what 1,200, like you said. So pretty good market share for Loveland. I mean, you can only do I mean, you can run the routes, you can beat coverage, but if your quarterback's not getting the ball, I mean,
Good
it,
luck.
it is what it is. So Loveland, I'm excited to see where he's going to go in the NFL draft. I do think Warren's going to get drafted in front of him. And if Warren gets top 10 draft capital, I mean, it's going to be hard not to draft him. But hey, then again, if Loveland maybe goes to Harborough or the Chargers in the first round, you never know. He's going to be skyrocketing. we all
There
know
it is.
we all know the Chargers need a tight end. So hey, maybe it's Loveland.
Yeah, and the Stars could be aligning on that. They need a tight end. It'd be great to slide him in there with Justin Herbert. Like you said, that's the Harbaugh connection. That's actually where Daniel Jeremiah has him going in his most recent mock draft, pick 22 to the LA Chargers. And that'd be great. I really think he's going to be a first round pick. Anywhere in the first round would be great for Loveland. And
Oh,
um,
100%.
like you said at the top of the show, when it comes to tight end prospects, what you're looking for, you like athleticism. I like that too, and that's why I have him as number one in my class because I think he's just a smooth route runner who in the right spot could be elite from a fantasy standpoint at the tight end position. And it's not even a slight on Warren as well. I mean, I like him a lot too. I agree he's gonna get drafted ahead of Loveland because he's a more complete overall player. I almost liken this to, and again, I'm not saying these guys are going to be Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce respectively. Okay, we want them to be for
Whoa, is that how
sure.
we're drafting? Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah, you said it. Commish said it. They're gonna. It's Kelsey and Gronk all over again. No, no, but it's
101, 102. Let's go.
it's almost like a light version of that debate that you see on various social media platforms. I mean, both guys first ballot Hall of Famers. We know that. But Gronk did a lot more than Kelsey in the blocking game. But Kelsey was a better pure wide receiver. So, if you know what you're watching on Sundays, you know that Rob Gronkowski was the better football player from a pure NFL standpoint. I don't think that's pretty open and shut based on what he could do in the blocking department that Kelsey just couldn't do. But Kelsey was filling up the box score at a higher level because one, he was healthier, and two, he's the better pure wide receiver, and the Chiefs utilized him in that role. They weren't asking him to block defensive ends like the Patriots were because Gronk had a more versatile skill set. So AKA better than Kelsey from a real football standpoint. But we won't tell Aaron we had this conversation because
Yeah, we
he's
won't. We
a
won't.
Chiefs
Yeah.
fan. We'll but that's more or less what I'm getting at though. Kelsey was the better tight end from a fantasy lens, where he had all his number one and two finishes because he wasn't asked to block. And I think Loveland's going to kind of fall into that category of a player when he gets to the NFL. Like we're okay, you can block when we absolutely need you to, but you're out here to catch the football and in a great landing spot. I think he could really excel in all that. So any last thoughts on Warren or Loveland before we kind of jump down tier on these tight end prospects?
Not much, but I'm excited to draft them in my tight end premium leagues.
Me too, man. Can't wait to do that. But we talked about uber productive off the top of the show with Warren, and that was certainly the case. But this next guy, Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green, the 6'4", 230-pound tight end there, finished up his senior season with a ridiculous 117 receptions, 1,555 receiving yards, and 10 scores. Absolutely ridiculous production. Granted, at a smaller school in the MAC, Ethan. But tell me about Fannin Jr. and where you're at on him.
Yeah, Fannin Jr. It's going to be interesting to see where he comes in at the combine in terms of height and weight. I mean, you see him a couple different places at like 6'4" or 6'3". So I mean, I think he's a little undersized, but obviously you can't argue with the production. I mean, he broke the tight end receiving and receptions record his senior year in 2024, 117 receptions, 1,555 yards, and like you said, 10 touchdowns. So I mean, great, obviously an amazing year. And when I watch him play, he does look a little stiff in his routes, and I think it limits his route tree a little bit. He's never gonna. I mean, he's good at working the defender's leverage to make them miss. But in terms of wiggle, I don't really see it. When you force them to kind of change direction or stop and yeah and change direction, he doesn't accelerate particularly great. After that, it takes him a little while to get going. So I don't. I mean, I don't see him being obviously this productive going forward. I do think he's a little undersized, so he's going to be that. I mean, that receiving threat in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be much of an inline blocker, but he did force 32 missed tackles in 2024. So obviously he is good with the ball in his hands. And what I did notice on tape too is his, I mean, just impeccable hands. I mean, if the ball is thrown his way, he's going to come down with it. So sure-handed, obviously very very, very productive. But it will be interesting to see where he goes in the NFL draft. I do see him mocked. I mentioned this in the quarterback episode. Chad Reuter right now is one of the few that have multi-round mocks, and he has Hannon going to the Bengals at pick 81. And just one last point on Harold Fannin. I'm going back to those three stats that I brought up in that PFF article. Fannin did eclipse the averages of those 34 600-yard NFL receiving tight ends. He was, I mean, had an amazing PFF grade at 96.3. His yards after catch per reception was 7.5. And then he led the nation with yards per route run of 365. So, I mean, if you're one of these analytical nuts, I mean, he's flashing off the page. But, I mean, you turn on the tape, you do see some things that you don't like. But, I mean, it's hard to argue with that kind of production.
Yeah, production was elite. There's nothing to knock on that, and for sure, PFF's number one rated college football tight end this year. Um, he was amazing. I mean, he had more yards and receptions than any other player in college and at any level. So it was an amazing season for him.
He had more yards in the Michigan quarterback threw.
You did. That's a good point. That's a good point. Crazy, crazy how bad, how good Colston Loveland was. I should say, terrible quarterback play. Have I mentioned that I like Colston Loveland on this show? But Fannin is the problem with Fannin is to me the only knock here is probably the like is he big enough just to stand up to it at the NFL level? I'm just not sure about that. Um, the NFL is not the max. Certainly, it's a different ball game altogether at that level. So I wonder with him if he's going to be pigeonholed into a receiving only type player. And the difference between someone like him and Loveland is Loveland has the prerequisite size to be a passable blocker, so he can be out there in a number of situations versus someone like Fannin if he is on the smaller side. Does him walking onto the football field telegraph to the defense that a pass play is coming because they don't trust him to to go out there and to be anything but a big wide receiver. And if that's the case, he really needs to land in a good spot with decent enough draft capital to make me feel good about it. And to be honest, the next few guys we're going to talk about fall into this camp as well, where what we think or don't think about them is going to change potentially drastically based on where they're drafted and when they're drafted. And I think Fannin kind of falls into that category for me where I'm monitoring him. I'm probably going to want pieces of him later if I can get him, but we'll see what the NFL thinks of him before we really formulate a strong opinion on him. But for now, he's a watch type of player. And like I said, you can kind of say that for the next couple of guys on this list. This next guy is Mason Taylor out of LSU, 6'5", 256 pounds. The first thing I put it down here for strengths for him, he has Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame caliber
Bloodlines.
genetics, bloodline, same thing. Like his father is actually former All-Pro pass rusher Jason Taylor, and his uncle is Zach Thomas, who was Taylor's teammate in Miami for a number of years. We remember those guys as Patriots fans, kind of just
Yes,
those
we do.
monsters down there that gave Brady fits from time to time, even though the Pats won most of those games back then, which was fun. But anyway, back to Taylor. I mean, a reliable producer. I think he's a guy who brings a really high floor to the position. He's physical at the catch point, not afraid to use his body to shield off defenders to secure a catch, and he's really good in the short areas of the field. I mean, his tape is littered with routes where he kind of disguises as a blocker, then quickly breaks out to the flat, and they get him a little check down pass, and he makes gets going downhill as well. But to be fair, I mean that could kind of work against him some ways too, where most of his yards after the catch was on those kind of short area manufactured targets. He doesn't. I don't think he's going to offer a ton of yards after catch outside of those type of routes that were designed for him. And obviously, those are different. Those are a lot harder to design for a player at the NFL level than they are in college. So There's some questions as to whether also if you can do it all in the receiving department at the next level. Can he run a full route tree? We're not sure. He wasn't asked to do it a ton. Overall, PFF didn't think a ton of him, graded him as the 63rd highest ranked tight end on the board in 2024. So not great in that department. But like I said, all these guys it's gonna kind of fade out, depend where they're drafted for sure. But give me your thoughts on Mason Taylor overall.
Yeah, Mason Taylor, like you said, I mean, he definitely has the genetics. I did like that he came in to LSU and was productive right away. I mean, right off the rip in 2022, he had 38 receptions, 414 yards, which is, I mean, hey, that's very good just to come in from high school and come in to LSU and produce in 2022 and in 2023, 36, 348. So it took a step back, and then obviously he had his best year in 2024, 55 for 546 and two touchdowns. I do think he's going to have above average athleticism. And but other than that, not much more to add on to what you said. I think a lot is going to ride on what we see in the combine with his athleticism. We say it over and over again. Athleticism matters at the tight end position, and when it comes to draft capital, right? I mean, if he doesn't go in the top, I mean, 4 rounds, I mean, he's completely, I mean, off your radar. Honestly, I mean, I would like to see him in the top 3 rounds at the very first 3 rounds at the very minimum. I mean, you just look at the top 10 tight ends, right? Dynasty wise. I mean, what do they all have in common? Is you have Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, Hawkinson, Kittle, Njoku, Andrews, Kincaid, Kelsey, Pitts. I mean, Evan Ingram, all those guys had first, second round draft capital, the third round capital at the very least for the most part. I mean, so we need these tight ends to be drafted with decent capital. With capital comes opportunity, and then, like I said, with athleticism, I mean that usually tends to lead to fantasy production. So it will be interesting to see how this process plays out for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a kind of a like I said, he's a high floor type player, and the draft is gonna tell a ton for this guy, and the testing too is gonna be a big part of that. So he's a I think he's kind of a safe option. I think the best outlook for him, if the testing isn't great and the draft capital's not great, he end up going the Tucker Craft route, where he kind of ends up in a place where he's like, again ends up being in a good situation. Maybe there's an injury around him, and he takes advantage of it. I think that's probably the best case scenario for him, unless the testing just blows us out of the water. Like I don't expect it, which I wouldn't expect, but we'll see how that goes. I think that's kind of his path to fantasy success. He's probably good enough to be an NFL tight end, and maybe he's a streamer for that reason. But a lot is up in the air with this player for sure. So those are our thoughts on Taylor. But there is one more guy we want to get to in this one, and this is one of my another one of my favorite players in this class. He's actually my tight end number 3 in Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, 6'4", 245, Ethan. So tell me, we'll let you start on this one, though. Tell me what you think of Arroyo and tell me why you agree he's your third favorite tight end.
So what I like about Arroyo is, I mean, he's at this pass catching tight end, but we know that he's a legit 6'4", 251 as he was just measured at the Senior Bowl. So I don't expect him to come in much. I mean, I don't expect him to be any shorter at the NFL Combine, and I don't. I mean, maybe he'll come in a little lighter for speed reasons, but I do like Arroyo. I mean, he missed a ton of time in 2022 and 2023 with knee injuries. I mean, he only played 11 games in those years and had very, very little production. 2022 he had 5 catches, 2023 1 catch, and then this past year he had 35 for 590 and 7 touchdowns. Ward looked at him quite a bit and was a favorite of his. I do think he was a massive riser at the Senior Bowl. There were reports that out of all the positions, Elijah Arroyo was the biggest riser of anybody. He was I mean, he was creating separation. I mean, he was doing everything he needed to do to obviously put his name on the map. And I do think, like you saw him early on, and then as the season progressed, it seemed like he became a better and better player, more just explosive. And maybe that has to do with coming back from those knee injuries, right? I mean, we all know those knee injuries take time. confidence. And obviously, since the beginning of the season all the way through the Senior Bowl, it seems like he's peaking at the Senior Bowl, and maybe he can continue to peak at the Combine. So I definitely liked what I saw. I do think there were a lot of scheme touches for him at Miami. I mean, a few of his, I mean, if you just look at the tape, a few of his touchdowns were just absolutely wide open. I mean, either broken coverage in the zone or just a very, very good scheme. But they did like to get the ball in his hands and watch him work. But I do think he has a chance to be the tight end three in this class. He's going to need a good combine. He's going to have to be very. He's just going to have to be very good throughout this entire process. Obviously, a lot of time up into the NFL draft, but he's a guy that led the class in yards after catch per reception of 9.9. His PFF receiving grade was a little low, 73.6. And as I alluded to with those three metrics, his yards per route run is 1.65, but which was a little under the averages I was talking about earlier. But his yak after the catch was very good, led the class like I said, but definitely a guy that he's on my radar, and I'm excited to see him through this entire process.
Yeah, me too. I don't. I mean, his issues are lack of production due to an injury. That's explainable.
Yep.
An injury cut his sophomore year short, and then impacted him into his junior year. A really tough knee injury, but that's behind him now. He's going to be 2 full years removed from that. And just like athletically, I just think he can win at every level. I mean, there's film of him catching it in the flat and making a play. He could do that. I mean, if you wanted to run up the seam, he could do that. You want him to work the sideline, no problem. He can make catches and keep his feet in bounds. So I think he's really, and I know he's really sure-handed too. He dropped one pass in 2024. So like we know the guy is capable of being that if he can stay healthy. And this is what I want to swing for with my tight ends, Ethan. I want athletic guys with upside, and I think he's doing enough in the process. The strong Senior Bowl, yeah, I think he's going to test well athletically, and if he does, he should be a day two NFL draft pick. And I want like this is a guy that I think is going to be if he gets that, might be pushing for a late first round pick in tight end premium leagues if he's drafted on day two. So I'm really high on Arroyo here. I have Warren and Loveland in tier one by themselves. At this moment in time, I have Arroyo in tier two by himself. So that's how high I am on Arroyo at this point in the process. Really like him. I would like the Patriots to draft this guy. I think he'd be a good fit here in New England. Hunter Henry's getting a little on in years. I think he'd be a good guide. Maybe he learns from Henry for a year, then stepped into that role in a Drake May offense in year two, hits the ground running. I think that'd be a great long-term landing spot for him. And the Pats are drafting early in the second round. They're also drafting early in the third round too. So I would love to see him in Patriots colors for the foreseeable future. So any last thoughts on Arroyo before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I just remember the couple of tight ends the Patriots drafted a few years ago in the
No,
third round.
no.
Keenan Asiasi, they were great
Oh God.
great picks.
The,
So
the draft has been the team's Achilles heel for too many years. It's
so
gross.
hopefully Arroyo, if he gets drafted in the Patriots in the third round, doesn't end up like Keenan Asiasi. But no, Arroyo, like I said, I'm just excited to see him through this process. Overall, I think this tight end class is pretty good. I mean, there's guys that we haven't even talked about there that are going to get into this mix because, like you just said, there is a clear tier one at the top, but after that, I mean, there's a lot of time left for players to vault each other or drop. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of guys that we didn't even get a chance to touch on today. I mean, there was plenty more to dive into. So, I mean, if you're a Gunnar Helm fan, or maybe if you're a Luke Lachey fan, like our co-host Aaron Downtown Brown is, being an Iowa guy, we're going to get to those guys down the road, folks. It doesn't mean those guys suck. There's more to get to for sure on this front. But that's just a quick hitting episode here with our top five tight ends at the position. Again, make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you're not missing a second of Sunday Surefire content. And until next time, folks, peace.